The sun was warm and golden across the trim lawns and white picket fences of our neighborhood, and the air carried the smell of freshly cut grass mixed with faint traces of barbecue smoke from down the street, and it felt like one of those ordinary summer days that should have passed without incident. My daughter Emma was laughing as she tried to kick a soft rubber ball across the yard, her small legs steady inside the braces that helped her walk, and her smile lit up the afternoon in a way that always made me forget how much she had already endured in her 9 years. I stood on the porch sipping water from a glass, watching her with the quiet pride of a parent who has seen every doctor visit, every therapy session, and every painful step lead to this simple moment of joy. That is when the voice came cutting through the air, sharp and shrill like the screech of metal on glass. "What is that child doing out here with that contraption?" The words froze me and made Emma pause mid-step, the ball rolling off into the flower bed. I turned and saw her. Kerren. She was the president of the Homeowners Association and the self-declared guardian of what she called the community standard. Her hair was sprayed into a stiff helmet of blonde, and her sunglasses reflected back the afternoon sun, so I could not see her eyes, but her mouth was curled into a line that promised trouble. I had dealt with her complaints before about garbage cans pulled in too late or holiday lights left up too long, but nothing prepared me for what came next. She stormed across the lawn, her sandals snapping against the pavement, her manicured fingers stabbing the air as if she were pointing out a crime in progress. No medical gear on the lawn. She screamed, and her voice carried far enough that neighbors turned their heads from porches and windows. I thought she was joking at first, some cruel attempt at humor, but there was no laughter in her tone, only fury. Emma instinctively stepped back closer to me, her braces clicking faintly with each movement, but Kerren was already there faster than I expected. Without asking, without hesitation, she bent down and yanked at the metal supports strapped to my daughter's legs. Emma screamed in shock and pain as the buckles snapped open and the braces clattered onto grass. I froze for a split second, disbelieving that someone could do something so vicious in broad daylight. Then I rushed forward, scooping Emma into my arms as she trembled and sobbed, her face buried in my shoulder. Kerren stood with the braces in her hands, holding them up like trophies. "These things are an eyesore," she declared loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is a family community, not a hospital ward. We have rules here, and I will not have medical junk displayed in plain view. It lowers property values." Her words dripped with contempt and arrogance, and she tossed the braces back onto the ground as if they were trash. I felt a hot surge of anger rising in me, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your vision narrow. My hand shook as I held Emma closer and whispered to her that she was safe, even though I was not sure what safe meant anymore with someone like Kerren next door. The neighbors who had gathered in the background exchanged uneasy looks, some whispered to each other, but no one stepped forward to intervene. Kerren folded her arms across her chest, satisfied with herself, like a queen who had enforced a royal decree. Her sunglasses hid her expression, but I imagined the smug gleam in her eyes. My daughter was crying in my arms, her small body shaking with fear and humiliation, and I knew that this moment was burned into her memory forever. I crouched down, setting Emma gently on the porch steps, and picked up her braces, brushing dirt from the straps. She reached for them with trembling fingers, but I stopped her and told her quietly that I would fix everything. I wanted to shout, I wanted to tear into Kerren with every ounce of rage I had, but my daughter's sobs reminded me that she needed comfort, not chaos. So I bit down on the fury swelling inside me and steadied my voice. "Stay away from my child," I said coldly. Kerren only tilted her head and smirked. "Follow the rules or pay the fines," she replied before turning and strutting back across the lawn as if she had done something noble. Her voice carried one last sentence over her shoulder. "This is a neighborhood, not a circus act." I held Emma again, rocking her gently until her tears slowed, but inside my thoughts twisted into a storm. The image of Kerren ripping away those braces replayed in my mind again, and again, each time sharpening into a blade of fury. I saw her arrogance, I heard her cruelty, and I felt the weight of every neighbor's silence pressing down on me. This was more than a rule, this was a line drawn in fire, and she had crossed into territory no one should ever step into. When Emma finally fell asleep that night, her braces safely back in place beside her bed, I stood in the doorway and made a silent promise. Kerren believed she had power because of her title, because of her loud voice and her threats of fines, but she had made one fatal mistake. She had laid her hands on my child, and for that, I knew there would be consequences. The neighborhood might still look calm on the surface, but something had shifted that afternoon. The air was different, the silence thicker, the shadows heavier. I looked out across the darkened lawns and saw her porch light glowing like a watchtower across the street. I clenched my fists, feeling the storm inside me harden into resolve. She thought she had won, but this was only the beginning. The next morning the neighborhood looked deceptively peaceful as the sun lit up rows of manicured hedges and neat driveways. But inside me there was no peace, only a restless churn of anger and determination. Emma was quiet at breakfast, pushing her cereal around the bowl with her spoon, and when I asked if she wanted to play outside, she shook her head. Her eyes carried a new heaviness, as though the yard that once gave her laughter had been stolen by fear. I promised her that I would make things right, and I meant every word. I decided to confront Kerren directly, hoping against reason that perhaps she had acted in a fit of temper and might be capable of regret. When I walked up her driveway, her porch was lined with potted plants arranged like trophies, and a flag fluttered from a perfect white pole. She opened the door before I could knock, as if she had been waiting. Her sunglasses were back in place, and her smile was sharp enough to cut. "I need to talk to you about yesterday," I said, keeping my voice level though I could feel my pulse quicken. She leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "If it is about the violation, then you know the rules. No unsightly equipment on the lawn. You should be thanking me for protecting our community." Her words dripped with satisfaction, as though ripping medical braces from a child had been an act of civic duty. I tried reason. I told her about Emma's condition, about the doctors, about how every brace was a step toward a normal childhood. I asked her to think with compassion, to imagine what it was like for a child to need them. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Compassion does not keep property values high." She said, "This is not a charity ward. If you want sympathy, then move somewhere else." I felt the conversation slipping like sand through my fingers. "Those braces are not optional," I said. "They are medical equipment. She cannot play outside without them." Kerren shrugged and replied, "Then keep her inside, out of sight. That is your responsibility as a parent. Do not make her condition everyone's problem." Something in me cracked. I left before the storm of words in my chest could escape, because I knew she would twist them and use them against me. But the sound of her laughter followed me down the driveway, like nails scraping across glass. That evening the HOA meeting was scheduled in the community hall, and though I dreaded seeing her again, I knew I had to speak. I arrived with Emma sitting beside me, quietly, her legs steady inside the braces Kerren had tried to strip from her life. The room was filled with folding chairs and neighbors who spoke in low voices, waiting for the meeting to begin. When Kerren walked in, she commanded attention, like a general entering a battlefield. She took her place at the head table and tapped the microphone with a polished fingernail. The meeting began with the usual monotony of budgets and landscaping updates, until Kerren's gaze settled on me. "We have a serious matter to address," she said, her voice sharp. "One resident has repeatedly violated community standards by displaying medical devices in plain sight. It is disruptive. It is unattractive. It is unfair to other residents." The room grew tense. I stood and spoke. My words were calm, but each carried the weight of truth. I explained Emma's condition again. I explained that the braces were not a choice but a necessity. Kerren cut me off. "You are exploiting your child for pity," she said loudly. "You want sympathy points. You want exceptions. But rules are rules, and your weakness does not exempt you from them." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Emma's eyes welled with tears, and my heart broke, seeing her caught in the crossfire of cruelty. Some neighbors looked uncomfortable, others stared at the floor, but no one stood up. Fear of Kerren's authority held them silent. She smiled like a queen certain of her reign. I realized then that logic would never move her. She thrived on dominance and on making others feel small. Confrontation only fed her arrogance. Days passed, and the tension grew heavier. Kerren posted on the neighborhood Facebook group, attaching a picture of Emma playing outside in her braces. Her caption read, "This is what happens when residents ignore rules and turn our neighborhood into a circus. Unsightly medical gear is not appropriate for family living." The cruelty of it took my breath away. The post attracted likes from her loyal followers and silence from others too afraid to challenge her. But a few comments whispered dissent. One neighbor wrote, "This seems cruel, she is just a child." And another wrote, "I think this goes too far." But Kerren quickly silenced them by reminding everyone of fines and penalties. Emma saw the post despite my efforts to shield her. She asked me why someone would call her braces ugly. I held her close, telling her she was strong and brave and beautiful, but I saw the way her confidence shrank. That was the moment I knew that talking was done. This was no longer about rules. This was about cruelty dressed up as authority. I started thinking differently. I stopped trying to win her understanding and began considering how to take away her power. I looked at her arrogance, her obsession with control, her need to be admired and feared, and I saw the outlines of a weakness. People like Kerren built their castles on illusions of strength, but one well-placed crack could bring the whole fortress crashing down. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked if Kerren would ever stop. I brushed her hair back, kissed her forehead, and said, "She will. I promise." And as I whispered those words, I felt the spark of a plan forming in the back of my mind. It was small, faint, like the first glow of a match, but it was enough to chase away the darkness that Kerren had tried to spread through our home. By the time I stepped outside and looked across the street at her glowing porch light, I no longer felt fear. I felt resolve. I knew now that the only way to protect my daughter was not through patience or reason, but through strategy. Kerren believed she was untouchable, but she was about to learn that even queens can fall. The plan began quietly, like a seed pressed into soil, unseen, but destined to grow. I spent long nights at the kitchen table with a notebook and my laptop. While Emma slept in her room, her braces resting beside her bed, I scrolled through pages of HOA bylaws, downloading every document I could find. The rules were strict to the letter, but as I read deeper, I began to see the contradictions. Kerren had written herself into power by using these rules as weapons, yet she had broken them in more ways than most neighbors could imagine. I walked the neighborhood during early mornings when the streets were still empty. I took photos of her yard where unregistered construction equipment sat behind her house, hidden from casual view. I noticed her 2 dogs barking wildly in the backyard, though the bylaws clearly limited each household to 1 pet. I recorded notes and organized them into a neat file. Every discovery was like adding another stone to a wall I was building between her and the throne she thought she could never lose. One afternoon, while Emma was at therapy, a knock came on my door. It was Mr. Lewis from across the street, a quiet man who usually kept to himself. He glanced over his shoulder before speaking in a low voice. "I saw what happened at the meeting. It was wrong. She has gone too far." He handed me a thick envelope of papers. "These are copies of old HOA records. She made changes without votes. She billed residents for improvements that never happened. I do not want to be involved, but maybe you can use these." His hands trembled as he passed the envelope to me, and I realized how much fear she had spread through the community. That night, I spread the documents across my dining table and felt a surge of clarity. Kerren's fortress was not made of stone. It was made of lies and intimidation, and now I had the proof to shatter it. I began gathering digital evidence as well. Screenshots of her Facebook posts mocking Emma. Comments she deleted, but not before someone captured them. Recordings of her voice screaming about property values while ripping braces from a child's legs. A neighbor who had a security camera had quietly given me the footage, and when I watched it, my stomach twisted, but my resolve only sharpened. Emma asked me one evening why I was spending so much time with papers and files. I knelt beside her and told her I was making sure Kerren could never hurt her again. She nodded solemnly, her small hand resting on mine. "Will it work?" she whispered. I smiled and said, "Yes, because truth always wins." The days ticked by and Kerren continued her reign, unchecked, certain that silence meant obedience. She strutted around the neighborhood, issuing warnings for grass too tall and mailboxes chipped with paint. She believed she was untouchable and that arrogance made her blind. Neighbors whispered more openly, now some stopping me quietly to say they hoped I was doing something. They wanted to see her fall, but fear still chained their voices. I assured them that the time was coming. When the next HOA meeting was announced, I felt the energy shift inside me. This was the arena where she had humiliated us before, and it would be the stage of her undoing. I prepared carefully printing documents, arranging photos into neat folders, saving video clips to a drive. I rehearsed in front of the mirror how I would remain calm while her fury boiled. The trick would not be shouting louder, but speaking with precision. On the night of the meeting, the air carried a heavy stillness. The hall filled with residents, shifting uneasily in their chairs. Emma sat beside me, clutching my hand, and I felt her trust like a steady flame in my chest. Kerren walked in late, as if to make everyone wait, her heels clicking against the floor. She wore a bright red blazer, her smile wide and false. She scanned the room, her gaze lingering on me with a smirk that said she still believed I was powerless. The meeting began with her voice booming over the microphone, listing petty infractions against neighbors who dared leave trash cans out too long. Then she announced with relish that she had issued a formal fine against me for what she called repeated violations. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My pulse raced, but my voice stayed calm. I stood slowly and reached into my bag. "Before you continue," I said, "I have something the community needs to see." Kerren laughed dismissively, waving a hand. "Sit down. You are not recognized." But I did not sit. Instead, I placed a folder on the table in front of the microphone. "This is evidence of misconduct. By you." The room went still. For the first time, I saw her smile falter. I opened the folder and laid out photographs of her unapproved renovations. I read aloud excerpts from the documents Mr. Lewis had given me showing how she diverted HOA funds. Gasps echoed through the hall. Kerren tried to interrupt, but her voice cracked with sudden desperation. I continued speaking, each word measured and clear. Then came the final blow. I connected a small drive to the projector. The screen flickered and showed the video of her storming across my lawn, yanking the braces from Emma's legs. The audio filled the hall with her shrill scream. No medical gear on the lawn. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Faces turned from shock to outrage. Neighbors who had once stayed silent now erupted with voices demanding answers. Kerren stood frozen, her face pale, beneath her makeup. She stammered, "This is taken out of context," but her words drowned in the rising tide of anger. Emma squeezed my hand tighter, her eyes wide, but for the first time shining with hope. The meeting dissolved into chaos as neighbors shouted questions and accusations. Kerren's power was slipping through her fingers, and she knew it. I gathered my papers and held Emma close. This was only the beginning of her downfall, but it was enough to show everyone that the queen they had feared was nothing more than a tyrant exposed. As I walked out into the cool night air with Emma by my side, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. The storm had broken. The fortress had cracked. And though the battle was not yet finished, I knew victory was no longer a dream. It was a promise waiting to be fulfilled. The days after meeting felt different, as if the entire neighborhood had awakened from a long sleep. People who once looked away now stopped me in driveways or at the mailbox to whisper their support. They spoke in hushed voices, still cautious, but no longer willing to bow to Kerren's rule. Emma walked with her braces in the yard again, and though she still glanced nervously toward Kerren's house, she smiled when neighbors waved at her. The fortress of fear was crumbling piece by piece. But Kerren did not vanish quietly. She stormed through the streets with the fury of a cornered beast, plastering notices on doors, threatening fines for imagined violations. She knocked on my door one evening, her face twisted with rage, and shouted, "You think you can humiliate me, but I run this community. You will regret this." I met her glare with calm silence, holding the door half open while Emma stood behind me. I said nothing because I knew words were wasted on her. She stormed off, leaving the echo of her sandals slapping the pavement. The next HOA meeting came sooner than expected. Kerren had called it herself in a desperate attempt to reclaim authority. The hall was packed tighter than I had ever seen neighbors squeeze shoulder to shoulder, buzzing with tension. Emma held my hand, her grip firm. Kerren entered wearing a blazer even brighter than before, her lipstick sharp, her smile brittle. She sat at the head of the table, tapping her pen against the microphone. "We are here to address slander and lies," she declared. "Evidence has been manipulated. I will prove my innocence tonight." Her voice was loud, but there was a crack in it, a tremor that betrayed fear. She began rattling off excuses about doctored videos, about jealous neighbors, about conspiracies to dethrone her. The room shifted uncomfortably, and I rose to my feet, slowly waiting for silence. When the noise settled, I stepped forward holding a new folder. "You want the truth?" I said. "Then let us show the truth to everyone tonight." I laid out more documents, this time financial statements traced back through her personal accounts, showing HOA funds redirected into her own projects. Copies of permits denied by the city, while she built illegal extensions on her home. Photographs of her dogs roaming freely, though she had fined others for the same infraction. And finally letters from neighbors who had been bullied into silence. Each page I turned was another nail in the coffin of her reign. The crowd erupted with anger, voices rising against her. Kerren shouted, "These are lies," but her voice was swallowed by the chorus of betrayal. I reached for the final piece of video once more, but this time I let it play longer. It showed Emma crying in my arms after Kerren ripped away her braces. It showed neighbors in the background horrified and frozen. The sound of Emma's sobs filled the hall, and the room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by her faint whimper on the recording. Kerren slammed her hands on the table. "This is not fair. She is just weak. She should not even be outside." The words slipped out before she realized what she had said, and in that instant the last of her defenders turned away. A woman in the front row stood and said, "How dare you speak about a child like that?" Others followed their voices, rising into a storm of condemnation. Police officers who had been quietly stationed at the back of the room stepped forward. One read from a document citing complaints of harassment and evidence of assault. Kerren's face drained of color as the officer announced that charges were being filed and that she was suspended from her role as president effective immediately pending investigation. The hall erupted with cheers and applause, neighbors clapping their hands together, shouting words of relief. Emma squeezed my hand and whispered, "She cannot hurt us anymore," and I felt my chest tighten with emotion. Kerren was let out of the hall, her protests echoing into the night, but no one listened. For the first time, her voice had lost its grip on the neighborhood. The weeks that followed sealed her fate. She was removed from the board, fined heavily for mismanagement, and forced to sell her house. Her once perfect porch stood empty, the flagpole bare, the windows dark. Neighbors began to breathe freely again, and for the first time the community felt like a place where families could live without fear of petty tyranny. Emma grew braver each day. She played in the yard with her ball, again her laughter returning like music to the street. Neighbors joined her games, bringing their children over to play too. What had once been a symbol of shame was now a symbol of strength. The braces she wore did not lower the value of the neighborhood. They raised the value of its spirit. One evening, the neighborhood Facebook group banner changed. The title read, "No More Kerrens on the Lawn," and the cover photo was a cartoon drawing of Kerren yelling while a child in braces kicked a soccer ball past her. It spread quickly through the community, turning into a local meme that left everyone laughing except the woman who had once ruled them. I sat on the porch with Emma, watching her play in the glow of the setting sun. She turned to me, her braces gleaming in the light, and said, "This is our lawn now," and I knew she was right. The fear was gone. The cruelty had been defeated, and in its place stood resilience and hope. Justice had not only been served, it had been seen. And in that moment, I understood that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with fists or shouts, but with truth, patience, and the unshakable determination to protect what matters most.